Hey, what's going on? SirBlackson97 here, back with another deck profile. Today we'll be profiling the Ursarctic Ice Jade Synchro deck. It's a fun little rogue archetype deck based around kind of just synchro summoning, but a lot of their main Ursarctic synchro monsters have a little bit of an interesting spin on synchro summoning. So we'll jump right into some of their more unique cards, starting with the level 1 synchro, 3 copies of Ursarctic Polary. Since the deck kind of focuses around these guys, we're going to be maxing all of their cards. Polary, along with all the other Ursarctic synchros, cannot be synchro summoned. They have to be special summoned by sending 2 monsters. Polary just needs 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner, while the other 2 require a level 8 or higher tuner and a synchro monster, while focusing on a specific level difference. Polary just requires the 2 monsters have a level difference of 1, while the other 2 require a level difference of 7. Polary, when special summoned, you get to activate Ursarctic Big Dipper. That's their field spell, straight from deck. You get to also tribute a level 7 or higher monster to add to hand or special summon an Ursarctic monster from graveyard. So already we kind of get a good idea of how this archetype works. We're doing a lot of tributing to special summon, and we're also applying that to their extra deck and synchro monsters, while applying some pretty interesting effects and gimmicks of their own. Up next, the long-awaited level 7 Ursarctics. We have 3 copies of Grand Chariot and 3 copies of Septentrion. Grand Chariot, as I mentioned, requires that level 8 or higher tuner and that synchro monster. When special summon, target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy them. And also once per turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets an Ursarctic card you control, tribute a monster from hand or field to negate the activation. It's a nice little bit of offense with clearing out the field and also protecting some of your cards. While Septentrion offers some interesting protection of his own. Negate the effects of face-up monsters without a level that were special summoned from the extra deck. That does include yours though, but to be fair, a lot of Ursarctic cards will lock you into just monsters with a level for the rest of the turn, so that is something to consider when deck building as well. And also what's cool is anytime your opponent special summons a monster, add an Ursarctic card from deck to hand. So again, nice little form of protection, while Septentrion adds a little bit more cards to your hand. Just in case anything goes wrong with your plays, you at least have something else cooking up in your hand to move forward. Up next, we're going to have some sort of tech choice synchros. A lot of the side deck and a few other cards in the main deck are a few just sort of level-focused cards, so you don't have to run these if you don't want to, but just in case you want to mess around with a few levels, you can also go into some outside archetype cards as well, because again, we're only restricted to cards with a level, so we don't have to worry about non-Ursarctic synchros. Starting off, we have 2 copies of Ravenous Croco Dragon Archithes. Gains 500 attack for each card in your hand, and you can only use each effect once per turn. If it's synchro summon, draw cards equal to the number of non-tuners used for its synchro summon, and then as a quick effect, discard 2 cards to target and destroy a card on the field. Kind of like a synchro version of Slifer the Sky Dragon with a little bit of a quick effect destruction as well. Up next, we have 2 copies of Adamancipator Risen Dragite. We're not going to be able to use its first effect as it involves excavating and revealing rock cards and then returning monsters, but its second effect is actually pretty generic and does work for us. So when a spell or trap is activated while a water monster is in the graveyard, quick effect, we can negate and destroy that card's effect, which is really nice considering it's just a generic level 8 synchro and we're going to be running tons of water monsters, so this will definitely come up a lot more often than you would think. Up next, we have 2 copies of White Aura Whale. When it's synchro summoned, destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. You can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during the battle phase. If it attacks a defense position monster, it has piercing damage. And if it's destroyed by an opponent's card, sent to the graveyard, banish 1 other water monster, special summon this card, treat it as a tuner. Works really nice with Ursarctics, as we can also use White Aura Whale as a tuner, along with Polary, to go into our other cards like Grand Chariot or Septentrion. So by little coincidence, it definitely works with the archetype. Also, the nice little attack destruction effect can work against links as well. If we're not able to mess with our opponent's non-leveled cards, we can just pretty much destroy them at will if we feel so inclined. Moving on to the main deck, we're going to focus on pretty much a huge bulk of the Ursarctic cards. We'll separate them into tuners and non-tuners. All the Ursarctic main deck cards, as a quick effect, let you tribute a level 7 or higher monster to special summon them from hand. We'll start off with their main archetype searcher, 3 copies of Meek Polar. As I mentioned before, we tribute a level 7 or higher monster from hand or field to special summon Meek Polar from hand. And like all other, or a majority of Ursarctic cards, we're locked into monsters with a level for the rest of the turn. Meek Polar, when special summon, lets us add an Ursarctic monster from deck to hand. Very nice, very good archetype searcher. Definitely want to max out on that one. Up next, we have 3 copies of Micbilus. When special summoned, we get to special summon another Ursarctic monster from hand. Nice way if we already have an established hand state, we can just get more cards out and start going into our extra deck plays through that. So definitely want to max out on that one as well. Up next, we have 2 copies of Mictanus. When special summoned, target an Ursarctic monster in the graveyard, add it back to our hand. Nice little recovery card. You can run 1 to 2 copies if you want, but I prefer running 2 as it's just a nice way to get more cards back into hand. Especially if you're going into Croco Dragon and you want to load up your hand a little bit more and a little bit quicker, Mictanus might be the way to go. Moving on to their tuners, same special summoning condition as the non-tuners, starting off with 3 copies of Megapolar. They also have an effect where if you control one other Ursarctic monster, you get to apply an effect when they're special summoned. Megapolar lets you target and destroy a spell or trap, so we're running 3 of those. This is a nice way to just clear out the field. Running 2 copies of Megatanus. When special summoned, we get to target a face-up monster our opponent controls and turn into face-down defense position. Like I said, if they're running link monsters or they can't go to face-down defense position, we'll just destroy them with White Aura Whale. Moving on to Megabilus. Running 2 copies of this, our final tuner from the Ursarctic line. When special summoned, while we have another Ursarctic monster, target a card in our opponent's graveyard, banish it. Really nice way to just screw with our opponent's state, or graveyard state, especially after we've destroyed it, or definitely messed it up along with stuff like Grand Chariot, Megapolar, even White Aura Whale as well. So it's just a nice way to kind of screw with your opponent's graveyard state and kind of get rid of more resources they might be accumulating. Moving on to the Ice Jade side of this deck, as we are running Ursarctics and Ice Jades. Running 2 copies of Octi. When it's normal, a special summon, send a water monster from hand to graveyard to draw a card. Octi, along with Tremora, have a shared or sort of similar effect where if a water monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, while this respective card is in the graveyard, banish it to special summon an Ice Jade from hand or graveyard. Tremora, along with that graveyard effect, also has the effect to send this card from hand or graveyard to special summon a water monster from hand. So another nice way to, if we don't have level 7 or higher monsters for our Ursarctics, we can just use stuff like Tremora to immediately get our stuff back out onto the field. And then it would be in the graveyard ready to go for its other additional effects. I usually run 2 copies of those, find that's pretty consistent levels to run. And then finally we got 2 kind of higher level Ursarctic cards. Got 1 copy of Kingfisher and 1 copy of Cosmulture. Kingfisher lets us equip it to a water monster we control. If we equip it to an Ice Jade monster, that card gets to attack while in defense position and applies its defense for damage calculation, kind of like Super Heavy Samurais. What's also cool is you can target 1 monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to the equipped monster defense special in this card and then bounce that card back to hand. Nice way to get Kingfisher out on the field, and also just, especially with Cosmulture being such high defense as 3000, you can get a lot of problematic cards back into hand. Speaking of Cosmulture, if we have a face-up field spell, we get to just special summon it from hand for free. And while we have Ice Jade's Inoian Cradle, that's their field spell, monsters your opponent controls can only activate their effects the turn they are summoned. Ice Jade monster battles an opponent's monster. That opponent's monster loses 1,000 attack during damage calculation only. So it's a nice way to, along with Kingfisher, put out some pretty good damage and also turn into a pretty powerful monster as well. Finally, rounding out the monster lineup is 1 copy of 3 Trolling Trolls. Bit of an interesting tech card. It's a bit restrictive as it does lock you into Beast Warrior, so you probably want to summon and use its effect the turn you have Polary already on the field, but it's normally special summon, target a Beast Warrior in the graveyard. Card's attribute and level become the same as that monster's, and also during the main phase, special summon a Beast Warrior with the same attribute and level as this card. Funny enough, while most Ursarctics are beasts, at least they're non-tuners, their tuner monsters are Beast Warriors. So it's a nice way to just copy those levels. Also, you can still synchro summon, as the non-level 1 Ursarctic synchros are Beast Warriors. So Polary is a beast, but Grand Chariot and Septentrion are Beast Warrior type. So it's another nice thing that it kind of lines up perfectly with this archetype. Definitely a nice little tech choice, completely optional, but still fun to pull off when you have the right setup with it. Moving on to the spell and traps, we have 2 copies of Big Dipper. This is our field spell, mentioned by Polary. Once per turn, if an Ursarctic monster would tribute a monster to activate its effect, which would be probably for its summoning or just like general effects, you can banish a level 7 or higher Ursarctic monster from graveyard instead. Each time a monster is special summoned, place a counter on this card. Once per turn, if a monster is special summoned and you have an Ursarctic synchro on the field, remove all counters from this card, minimum of 7. Target a monster your opponent controls, take control of it. Just terrifying. It adds counters and rewards you for playing the deck, and if you also have an established synchro monster and your opponent's trying to fight back, or even if you're just continuing your combos, just grab a monster on their field. Truly a terrifying card. But not as terrifying as this next one. We're running 3 copies of Ursarctic Radiation, their continuous spell. Activated by placing 7 counters on it. Each time an Ursarctic monster is special summoned from the hand or extra deck, remove a counter, draw a card. Once per turn during the end phase, target an Ursarctic card in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck. Yeah, that draw power is not once per turn. It's only the end phase shuffle back into deck effect. You can only control one of them, but as long as you have counters and you're still special summoning, just keep drawing cards and removing counters. It's incredible. It's great. Definitely one you want to see in your opening hand, as it will definitely reward you in that early game and very much get you an established board, especially if you want to pull off that Big Dipper combo with your Ursarctic synchros. Definitely want to get to your radiation as quickly as possible. Moving on, next we have their other searcher, Ursarctic Departure, running 3 copies. Discard a card to grab 2 Ursarctic monsters from deck to hand. And the turn it wasn't sent to the graveyard, if you're using that Ursarctic Tribute effect, banish this card from the graveyard instead. Really just fantastic card to have, especially if you want to shuffle it back into the deck for repeated usage, or you just want to leave it in the graveyard if you want to get out just sort of that additional banish along with Big Dipper. Definitely extend some pretty good fields with it. I absolutely recommend maxing out on your departures. Up next, you can run 2 to 3 copies of this one, but this is Ursarctic Slider. It's basically their Monster Reborn, but you can target an Ursarctic monster that is banished or in the graveyard, special summon it. Can't attack, destroy it during end phase, but you're probably going to use it for those synchro plays. This one also restricts you to monsters with a level for the rest of the turn, but it's basically meant to just recover something. It's nice that it also recovers from the banish zone, so if you are using Big Dipper to banish, you can still retrieve them back with your sliders. Moving on to the Ice Jade, spells, we have their field spell in question, Cenote and Noean Cradle. When it's activated, grab an Ice Jade monster that is banished or in your graveyard back to the hand. Once per turn, if a monster is special summoned, target a water monster you control. That monster, along with any face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, lose attack equal to the targeted monster's original attack until the end of this turn. Nice way to just weaken your opponent's monsters, but also it's just great that you can just retrieve your stuff back from graveyard to hand. Definitely a great card to use. And also, on the topic of searching and just grabbing from deck, Ice Jades have their own version of Departure, and it's not once per turn. As if that isn't terrifying enough. We have 2 copies of Cradle. It does have its own caveat, though. Add an Ice Jade monster from deck to hand, but it has to be a different name from the cards you control or in your graveyard. That doesn't include hand, so if I have a bunch of Ice Jades just kind of sitting in my hand, I can absolutely use its effect to continually loop and get more searches off. Definitely recommend pulling that off. It's a lot of fun. Up next, we have 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Raigeki, respective clearing out monsters and clearing out spell and traps, just to kind of make sure that when your board is ready to go for the battle phase, you don't have to worry about your opponent's monsters or spell and traps getting in the way. And then finally, the only trap card we're running is their continuous trap, 3 copies of Quint Charge. Activate by paying 700 life points. Or actually, once per turn, you pay 700 life points to activate one of these following effects. You can grab an Ursarctic back from graveyard to hand, or tribute 2 Ursarctic monsters and then special summon an Ursarctic with a level equal to the difference between those two monsters from the extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And when your Ursarctic Synchro is destroyed by an opponent's attack, activate this effect. Your opponent must shuffle cards into their deck so the total number of cards on hand, field, and graveyard equals 7. Yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, it is specific because it's an attack, but still, if you're able to pull that off and just make your opponent have just 7 cards in total, that's kind of just terrifying. But it could be a bit of a double-edged sword, as they could shuffle back resources that they can just retrieve from the next turn, so use your Quint charges wisely. Moving on to the side deck, I did mention a couple of other tuners that you can use, as what's nice is their non-tuners are level 7, so if you run level 1 tuners, you can definitely bounce back into some pretty cool monsters like Dragite, Ravenous Croco Dragon, White Aura Whale. So it's a nice way to pair up. Ravenous Croco Dragon, you would probably need to use a level 8 Synchro and then some of your level 1 tuners, but again, other cards you can vary and use at will. You're only really restricted to monsters with a level, so it gives it a little bit more variety and leniency with what sort of formulas or engines you want to include. But we only have 2 tuners in our side deck. We have 3 copies of Fishborg Launcher to start us off with. Bit of a retrain from the infamous and feared Fishborg Blaster. But Launcher says we can't use it as synchro material unless it's a water synchro. Good thing our extra deck is full of them. And if you have a monster that isn't Launcher in the graveyard, and all of those monsters in question are water, you can just special summon it from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. Definitely a nice source of little recovery, and it's nice considering that all of our Ursarctics pretty much special summon themselves. So we get to definitely, if we have to, use up our normal summon for Launcher, get a Synchro off, and then we also have its graveyard effect that we can take advantage of. And then finally, another card that's similar to 3 Trolling Trolls that just happens to pair with the archetype. We have Yamatako Orochi. We're running 3 copies of this. You can use it as a level 8 or level 1 monster when used for a Synchro summon. And then based on its level that was used, if you use a level 8 or lower monster, gains 800 attack. If you use a level 9 or higher monster, inflicts piercing damage. Pretty much like I said, the Ursarctic tuners just happen to be level 8. So this works perfectly alongside the other non-tuners like the level 7s. So we can easily go into our other Ursarctic synchros no problem, especially with stuff like Yamatako Orochi, as we can just make it level 8, combine it with Polary, and then we can go into Grand Chariot or Septentrion as well. So it's a nice little way to kind of experiment and mix and match with other cards you want to use. But for the most part, that's how we're reaching through the stars, is through all these fearsome water monsters. That'll do it for today's deck profile. Thank you all so much for waiting on this deck. It's been a long time creating this, but I'm excited to finally have this built and ready for duels. And thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys next time when we cover the Malefic deck. Peace out.